this video, I'd like to go through how we factorise quadratic equations. Now, let's just think for a second what we mean by factorising. Well, factorising means putting it back into brackets. So, hopefully you already know this, but quadratic equations can typically be put back into two brackets. And that's what we want to do here. This is a bit more of a challenging one because we have a number in front of the x squared that isn't 1. When that number's 1, it's quite straightforward to factorise a quadratic. But with that 6 being there, it can be a little bit more challenging. So let's have a look and let's see how we factorise it. The first thing I'm going to do though is write down a general expression for a quadratic. Ax squared plus bx plus c. That's the most general quadratic equation that we can have. Remember, a is the coefficient or number in front of x squared, b is the coefficient of x, and c is our constant term. And if we compare our equation with the general one, we can write down the values of a, b and c. So I think that's the first step in which we should take. So what's my coefficient of x squared? Well, it's 6 here, so I can write down that a is equal to 6. b is my coefficient of x, and if I look at my equation, the number in front of my x is 10, and it's plus 10, so it's positive 10. So I can write down that b is equal to 10. And finally, if we look at the general equation, the constant term is c, and for our equation, that constant is minus 4. So it's very important that you take the sign as well as the number. So c is minus 4. So to factorise a trickier quadratic equation like this, the first thing we should do is work out the value of a times c. A multiplied by c. So in that case, that is 6 times minus 4, which is equal to minus 24. That's the first step. We could call that step 1. The next step is to find factors of a times c. So factors meaning two numbers that multiply to give us that value of a times c. And we want those factors to add to the value of b. So let's think for a second. Two numbers that when they multiply together, they give me minus 24. Well, I've got two already. I could say 6 and minus 4. But when I add these together, 6 plus minus 4, that gives me 2. It certainly doesn't give me 10. So 6 and minus 4 are not the factors that we were looking for. Let's have a look at, well, let's take minus 12 and 2. Let's write those down for a second. Minus 12 and 2. Well, they multiply to give me minus 24. And if I add them together, though, I get minus 12 plus 2. Well, that gives me minus 10. I'm looking for plus 10, so these are not the factors we were looking for. But it's minus 10, and we wanted plus 10, so that's a massive hint of what the two factors are. If I just swap the signs around and go with 12 and minus 2, that will work now. Let's think about that. 12 times minus 2 is minus 24. That's good. 12 plus minus 2. Well, that does indeed give me 10. Exactly what I was looking for. So now I've found my two factors, I can move on to the next step. And the next step is to simply rewrite the coefficient of x in terms of these two factors. So I'm going to say, let this become 6x squared plus 12x minus 2x minus 4. Now it looks completely different. We've got an extra term in that we didn't have before, but if we just work out 12x minus 2x, we come back to 10x. So actually we've not changed anything at all. But what we have done is allowed us to get a little bit closer to factorising it. So what we do now, we draw an invisible line down the middle there that's separating the 12x and the minus 2x. I take these first two terms and then I just look and see what terms they have in common. So I know they've both got an x in common, so I can bring an x out. And do they have any numbers in common? Well, I have a 6 here and a 12 here. Now I know 6 goes into 6, it goes in there once. I also know 6 goes into 12 two times, so I have a common factor of 6 as well. So I'll bring that out the front of my bracket. And what am I left with on the inside? Well, I did have a 6x squared. I brought out an x and I brought out a 6, so that will just leave me with an x. And looking here, I took out an x and I took out a 6, so that only leaves me with a 2 here. So I've got x plus 2 in my bracket. And as a quick check, see if you've done it correctly, if you multiply your bracket back out, if we do 6x times x, we get 6x squared. And if I do 6x times 2, I get 12x. And that brings me back to what we had before we tried to factorise that bit. So I know I factorised it correctly. So I've taken the first two terms and factorised them, and I know that's correct because I've checked it. So for the right hand side of this invisible line that we've put in, I'm going to put an x plus 2 again. Because what I want here in the bracket here should be the same as what we have here. The only thing different is the number in front of our bracket. And so what I say to myself is, well, if I've got an x plus 2 here, what do I need to multiply this by to give me a minus 2x and a minus 4? And hopefully you can see, if I've got x here and I want a minus 2x, well, I need to multiply that by minus 2. And again, a quick check. If I do 2 times minus 2, that gives me minus 4, and that's exactly what we had here. So I know that bit's correct. The final step, and then we're almost there, is to factorise the whole expression. What can we see that both terms have got in common? They've both got an x plus 2. So I'm going to take that out to a common factor. And if I take the x plus 2 away from here, if I cover that up, what am I left with? I'm left with a 6x. And similarly here, if I take away the x plus 2, what am I left with? Just a minus 2. So that is what goes inside my second bracket. This has now been factorised into two brackets. And I think at this point here, this is where I'd leave it at. Now, if you wanted to factorise it further, you would notice that actually there's a common factor of 2 between these two terms. So if you wanted to factorise it a little bit further, you could actually pull out a 2 from here. Let's just do that just to show you. So I can't do anything with this x plus 2, so I'll leave that alone. But I can take out a 2 from both of these, and that would leave me with a 3x and a minus 1. And I'm going to put that 2 outside the very front of the brackets. So that's a method of factorisation when you've got a more awkward quadratic to try and solve. Thank you for watching.